Hi, my name's Sean from Sean Sports Cards, and I do love sports cards. And today I want to talk about something that is dear to my heart, particularly with last weekend, the first Formula One race of the season in Australia. This weekend we're in China. Looks like Mercedes are going to run away with things, but we'll see how we go. It's a long season. There's lots of twists and turns to come both on the track and off the track as well. And it has made me think about the Formula One market because the Formula One cards that I have up on eBay, I've been starting to get some more offers for those cards recently. Than usual, some back and forth on my Max Verstappen printing plate and things like that this week, which has been interesting to see. And it made me reflect a little bit on Formula One and the collectible side of things for me. So when I first started getting into Formula One trading cards again, it felt like the perfect overlap of two things that I've loved for most of my life. So I grew up watching Formula One, living in Australia. We get a highlights package every time there was a race on a weekly sort of sports magazine show called Wide World of Sports. That would always be showing, the Iron Man from Hawaii and things like that. But they'd always be showing the Formula One, even when there were no Australian drivers in it, or especially during the heyday of you know Senna and Prost and Mansell and Berger and Alesi and the start of even rolling into Schumacher and Hill and all these iconic moments in mid to late 80s. I wasn't quite there for Patrese, but sort of the end of Patrese, PK. I actually was there for Patrese. It wasn't PK. Um, and once a year, obviously the Grand Prix would be in Adelaide, and I would watch every race that weekend. So all of the feature races, the open seater Formula whatevers, the supercars, the excitement of the practice sessions because you finally got to see the Formula One cars on the track, then the qualifying sessions, obviously the race. Just a weekend of telling my family that I've got the TV, I'm glued to the TV, and then going outside, getting on my bike, putting attaching a playing card with a clothes peg to make that sort of engine noise, and riding my bike around the playground, recreating these races and these sort of twisty turns and things like that. And obviously, at the same time, I've always loved trading cards as well. So when the modern Formula One card market really started to take off in 2020 with that first Topps Chrome release, it felt obvious to me that I would buy into those breaks. I remember the prices for Mercedes being lower than I thought that they would be. I think people were higher on Verstappen, and I sort of looked at it and I was like, well, Hamilton's the guy you want to chase here. And I got that right. I didn't quite hit like a massive card, but I hit some interesting cards. And it was two interests colliding. Like I knew Formula One, I love Formula One, I knew trading cards, I love trading cards. Made sense, right? The funny thing is, for me, it wasn't the first time that I'd collected Formula One cards. And for a lot of people, I think it was, but for me, it definitely wasn't. Back in the mid 1990s, when I was a young teenager, there were sets that now people have started to turn their eyes to, more produced by a company called Futera. And I remember in particular two main sets, the 1994 and 1995 Adelaide Grand Prix sets, um, were so exciting to me at the time. Like, and you discover them by walking into your local shop, your local, we call them milk bars, off license corner store type shop, and there they were. They were just like next to the cricket cards would come in. I was super excited about those, and obviously Australian football cards was sort of the core thing I was collecting. This was probably around the time where I was buying. I've talked previously about buying like basketball cards as well. So particularly Fleer around 93, 94. But for me, the drivers were legends. The cards felt like pieces of the sport. This was when I was collecting purely for the collection. I wasn't even trying to get the set because I couldn't afford all of the cards. I wasn't So I see kids on these Instagram and YouTube videos taking like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, $10,000 cards. I was just using my like $3 of pocket money to buy a pack of cards because I loved ripping stuff, and I still do love ripping stuff. It's just prohibitive to do so now. Um, so when this new wave of Formula One cards came out, 25 years later, I had this real sense of nostalgia mixed in with excitement of sort of the modern hobby. I was rediscovering something. The appeal was really easy, really obvious. That I love that 2020. chrome set. The designs are clean. The driver lineup was great. Like that first set, you've got Hamilton, you've got Verstappen, but you've also got. It was interesting. We didn't have Alonso that set, but you've also got Russell and Norris and Ricciardo, like some Raikkonen's in there, like brilliant set of drivers. And because Formula One has such a small amount of athletes compared to other sports, it created this impression that there were only sort of a handful of truly important cars. We all laugh now about the Nikita Mazepins that we've got, or the Sultan IM cards that we've got, like junk, frankly. And no disrespect to those drivers, but junk. So if you could get the right sort of rookie, if you could find the right legend, the right big name, then maybe you'd have something really special like those. I really wanted a Hamilton auto, and I didn't get one, no matter how many breaks I bought into. That was what I really, really wanted, because that would be something really special to have, something to build a collection around. And for a while in my head, that narrative worked. It was easy. Like I got swept up in it. I was buying into lots of breaks, lost a lot of money on them. But after a while, I started to notice something for me about Formula One cards that didn't quite sit for me. And it didn't happen overnight, but it was this sort of slow accumulation of observations. For me, one of the big first ones was that once Topps saw, and this is, again, no shade at Topps, it makes sense as part of their business model, but the way their releases were structured, that special pang of the Chrome set got diluted because we had Topps Now, and we had Lights Out, and we had the paper release of the Chrome set, and we had Excellencia, and I just sort of thought it's taking away, there are now literally hundreds of different Max Verstappen cards and Lewis Hamilton cards. It just didn't mean anything anymore to pull one of those. And on top of that, everybody in the hobby were chasing the one or two new drivers being positioned as that next major chase. Everybody wanted these 1 to 2 rookies. And because of that, they got super expensive. A rookie here, another rookie there. And the storyline was always similar. Like, this person could be the next superstar. And there are two that really stood out to me. Okay, but this person could be the next superstar. And it's sort of like American football breaks with the key quarterbacks at the top of each class, right? But imagine if that was the case, but only if the whole NFL was 20 players. Now, beyond all of that, if you take a step back and think about Formula One as a sport, if you know Formula One as a sport, you realize how unlikely it will be that these rookies year on year are going to break through. The likelihood that Franco Colapinto is going to win a world championship, or the likelihood that Ollie Behrman is going to win a world championship, or the likelihood that insert name here is going to win a world championship. There are 20 seats on the grid. Careers can be brutally short. Have a look at Drive to Survive, the most recent series. Have a look at Jack Doohan if you want a case study on how brutal it can be. Even really talented drivers can disappear after a few seasons if the circumstances aren't right. They never reach the pinnacle. The politics doesn't work out. My Instagram has been filled with Daniel Ricciardo nostalgia recently, I think because of the Australian Grand Prix. Everybody lamenting the fact that all of a sudden in our minds, and I think Mark Webber was the same way as well, and obviously I have an Australian bent, but there's this narrative that Ricciardo was robbed a world championship. He was never even close. I love Daniel Ricciardo, but he was never even close. Okay? So from a cards perspective, there's this idea that there would always be this new must-have rookie, and it started to feel a bit like artificial. People are starting to pump up these drivers, and you sort of look at it and you go, I don't get it. I don't see it. It's not impossible, but it's incredibly improbable, and it felt like the more releases I watched and the more that the card pool for Verstappen and Hamilton got diluted, people who are genuinely greats of the sport, it felt like the people in the hobby, the people who love Formula One cards, needed to push that narrative of those chase cards in order to keep it relevant. We needed the new hype. We needed the new reason to open boxes. We needed the new reason to chase. And I started clocking this pricing behavior. Cards are being talked about like they are long-term historical pieces, but they're tied to drivers who had barely established themselves in the sport. Like if I think about the two that really triggered me were the rookie prices for Kimi Antonelli and Oscar Piastri. Then they still could be great. They're in good cars. They're great drivers, but they have barely done anything yet. Okay? And it felt like, for Formula One in particular, it felt less like collecting and more like speculation. It felt more like Bowman Chrome baseball than I don't know, football or something like that. Now, don't get me wrong, different people approach this hobby different ways. Speculation isn't automatically bad. But my problem became when speculation became the engine of the market. And that's when I started paying attention to that because I feel like markets built purely on speculation can change direction very, very quickly. Now, there wasn't a dramatic moment where I slammed on the brakes and said, that's it, I'm done. And I remember at the time when people were talking about Piastri, I was like, I'm out on Piastri. The only Piastri I picked up I think a 399 rookie card because it was like 50% under comps. So I started to have this sort of slow realization. I looked at the cards I had, I looked at the releases, and I thought, if none of these cards increased in value from here, would I still want them? And the answer was not really. I don't really like. I'm not a Mercedes fan. I like Kimi Antonelli, but 10 years from now, he's just another driver on the grid, right? Would I collect the Daniel Ricciardo? Yeah, sure. Would I collect the Mark Webber? Yeah, sure. Would I, Australian drivers, my thing? Sure. But not for the kinds of prices that we're talking for these kinds of cards. It's not for me. Okay. Not in the way that I want cards in other parts of the hobby. So, like when I buy certain football cards, I'm happy to own them regardless of value because of the link to, in particular, my kids. So, somebody like a Messi, right? Moments that matter to the sport, that the 2022 World Cup Prism, for example. Okay. But with the Formula One cards, I realized that I was starting to hold them because of what they might become, not because of what they already represented. Okay, so I've started to step away from Formula One. I started buying into that, started walking away from that. Because I'm walking away from that niche frees up space and time. I wasn't watching release calendars, chasing rookies, overpaying in breaks, freeing up the mental energy, freeing up the focus. Okay, I could put that attention back into the areas of the hobby that bring me genuine joy. Cards that are tied to players that I actually care about longer term and not necessarily ones that will flame out. So, for example, there are 20 seats on a Formula One grid, 22 this season. There's only one world champion. Since 2015, there have been about 60 different drivers on the grid of a Formula One race. And of those 60, 4 of them have won the world title. So unless you're buying Hamilton or Verstappen cards, and for Hamilton and Verstappen, that market has become so saturated that there's only really a handful that are worth holding. You're basically spinning the roulette wheel. I want cards that feel meaningful as objects, not just assets. Cards, again, like I always revisit this. If this card went to zero, if this Pokemon card went to zero, if this football card went to zero, would I be happy to just have it? And that shift changed how I look at niches in the hobby more generally. So when I look at a new category, where it's a sport or a set or a type of card, do I genuinely like this if the market disappears tomorrow? And design is a fine reason to keep a card. I'm not necessarily wedded to any of the particular designs, but if the market disappeared tomorrow, would I be happy to just have it? Okay. Does the long-term story make sense? Like collecting Ricciardo makes sense to me as a guy. There is an argument to be made that because of his relevance in Drive to Survive, that he will retain a bit of an outlook if he chooses to. He could be relevant, but probably not. Definitely not at the prices that people are trying to sell at the moment. And thirdly, am I here because I enjoy it or I feel like I should be here? And I think if you feel like Formula One is a viable long-term investment, you are banking on a move in the hobby that would raise all ships, not just Formula One. I don't see a world where this, we've been doing Formula One cards for 6 years now. All of that money that people said was going to come in from people because the average, what were some of the rationales? Like the average Formula One fan is richer, et cetera, et cetera. That would have happened. It's probably happened if it was going to happen. The next bump in Formula One is going to be as a different result. So it's got to sort of fit into all of it. Because the trading card hobby is full of people pushing new opportunities, and it was always worth remembering that. Sort of why are they talking about this? Why is this important to them? There's new sports, new sets, new next big things. When I first came back to the hobby late last year, my Instagram was just full of people flogging tennis and darts cards. Who knows what it's going to be next, right? And look, some of them do become meaningful parts of the hobby long term. I remember back in 2020 or so, lots of Americans that I was listening to and watching saying, there is no way soccer will ever be important. And I still think that they're wrong on that. Okay. But most of these things are speculative. They don't. And I think the skill isn't in predicting every winner. The skill is being comfortable with walking away from cards and from sports and from sets that don't feel right. There's a lot of conversation about what to buy, but not enough about what to leave behind. And the smartest move sometimes isn't identifying that rookie or the next opportunity. It's recognizing when something doesn't align. Okay. The biggest difference between you and the casino is the casino has to play the hand. The casino, generally speaking, has to set a market. You don't have to partake. Stepping away from Formula One cards wasn't a big dramatic decision. I will still probably buy if I see a gap. I will still buy Formula One cards, but you don't have to collect everything. You don't have to participate in every market, and you definitely don't have to stay in a niche just because you spent time there. Sometimes the healthiest thing that you can do as a collector is say, "That was interesting. It was great, but it's not for me anymore." All right, that's the rant. Thanks very much for watching. Just chugging along with these YouTube videos. Make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe, and I'll be back next week for some more hobby insight. Thanks very much for watching. This was Sean Sports Cards. Have a good week.